You know that old spiritual, my soul looks back and wonders how it got over. Well, check it out. My soul wonders how it got over. How it got over. My soul looks back.
We get over the same way we have gotten over before and before that and before that. Welcome to Mama Drama Trauma Academy. I'm Tammy Taylor, your manifestation muse and terrestrial guide to mother wound empaths. Specifically those of us sick and tired of being sick and tired, raw. What we call ready, able, and willing to heal the shame, blame, and guilt of MDT. By letting go of the mother we want in order to accept the one we have. That's a big order. So Great Mother and her spirit team of angels, guides, and ancestors support this inner work. Sometimes we may be willing, but to do the inner work, we may not be ready. Sometimes we can be ready, but we're not able. As empaths, we are able. But either we're not ready or willing to activate this ability, often feeling that we're not yet able. Working with the angels, guides, and ancestors, we learn how to go from highly sensitive, maternally wounded people with the capacity to self-heal to healthy, operating empaths able to heal ourselves and others. This is part 2 of our AGAS series. Part 1 was who they are and how we connect with them. Today is empaths, angels, and how we communicate with them from sensitivity to ability.
You know, my soul looks back and it wonders how it got over. But you know, I know it's my angels, my guides, my ancestors who were with me every step of the way, every day, making sure no matter what came my way, I would have guidance to get over, around, under, and find my way to where I needed to be. Yet my soul still looks back, looks back, looks back.
There are 3 disclaimers. Number 1, use self-awareness when determining how, when, and with whom you apply this information. It is your responsibility to use it according to what you know is true for you and about you. 2, if you are in any form of mental or emotional therapy or in a doctor's care, though imparted tips, tools, and techniques are proven as effective supplements to formal care, what is offered here is not intended to replace it. If you are at any time triggered, pause the session and resume once you've regulated. And 3, while Mama Drama Trauma Academy specifically speaks to empaths with the mother wound, absolute accuracy is not guaranteed, nor are results of healing sessions, information, communication, video content, consultations, and sessions with me, Tammy Taylor, or anything on the mamadramatrauma.info website. All content is created for educational, spiritual, and entertainment purposes only. Washed up on the shores again. Empaths, old souls. The cycle of birth and rebirth, emotion, dysregulation, regulation. The cycle of clarity balance and confirmation. Breathe. Washed up, but never washed out. When we are ready, able, and willing to accept our divinity identity. Welcome to Mama Drama Trauma Academy, where our mantra is, I am a dearly loved divine soul, divine child of the great Mother, Father, God, who was never judged, condemned, or left alone. This is a frequency that allows our capacity to be grounded, to be at the emotional seas of life, to breathing the air of the ethers, and even flying to higher and higher heights of existence. Today we're talking about communicating with our angels, guides, and ancestors, making the journey from point A, sensitivity, to point B, the ability, the sensitivity of MDT, the emotional dysregulation, the exaggerated startle response from feeling what our mother feels in the very depths of her abandonment and abusive behavior towards us and oftentimes others, and moving from that state with the support of our angels, guides, and ancestors to divinity, identity, ability, enabling that natural sensitivity to serve instead of disserving us, taking flight. Today we're going to be using the analogy of air travel to explain and to illustrate what is meant here about that transformation. We're working with our divinity identity as always. But today we want to impart the importance of how to use this information as a mother wound empath. We all have angels, guides, and ancestors. But as an empath, it's very important, since we have a default connection with our soul groups, be they terrestrial or celestial. We operate within the unified field, which is often very disorienting for those of us who have not been raised or taught about this energy. So today the question is, as we take flight, this healing journey from being washed up and feeling washed out, are we the passenger on the plane, the pilot, ground or tower air traffic controllers? Want to be really clear about which one we are, because it determines what journey we take from A to B. Which one are you? You want to know in order to be clear when you're asking. In part 1, we talked about connecting with our angels, guides, and ancestors, and the 4 parts of that connection. The first being asking the angels. And so when we're asking, we want to know what the rules, what the terms of the communication is, what the rules of conduct need to be, what position we play in order to achieve it. This is especially important to mother wound empaths, who have a great need, not just for angelic support in general, as everyone does, but to be mothered by them. In part 1, we talked about the different kinds of mothering that we need and that the angels provide. We're in guide training. As mother wound empaths, we are learning how to receive guidance so that we learn how to deliver it to others in ways that are helpful to them. So when we are struggling with this transcendence through addiction, we are often already ancestors to ourselves. The addiction has to do with a fear. It has to do with an avoidance. And for many of us who incarnate in the same bloodlines, and this is often quite indicative of the attachment to the bloodline, because we are needing to heal and resolve something there. And oftentimes we skip bloodlines. We've been many races and ethnicities, but we will return to a particular bloodline, especially the more we evolve. And as old souls, we've had many experiences and many cultures and many traditions in what they call races, which is really an artificial adage, but it nonetheless is a cultural creation that we experience, a tradition that we experience, and we'll return to these very profound bloodlines to go through a rites of passage and initiation into this guide training. So this karmic loop, what the Hindus in the Vedic tradition address with mantra, and why Great Mother gave us the mantra, I am a dearly loved divine child of the Great Mother Father God, who was never judged, condemned, or left alone. This 108 loop, the 9 planets, including the nodes, and the 12 signs of the zodiac, and this 108 loop that energizes us with the frequencies of the cosmos as we are undoing what has been done. And what has been done with Mama Drama Trauma, there has been an accumulation of actions and behaviors that do not reflect the wisdom we've gained over these many lifetimes. Because of our attachment to primarily our families, the root of the family is the mother. There are behaviors that we are not evolving into, even though we know better. For example, believing and practicing religions and traditions that do not align with us. Remember, our soul contract with this particular affliction is to evolve in self-love, love ourselves enough. Self-love and spiritual independence to have our own relationship with Great Mother Father God. Our angels help us with this. Our angels specifically help us with this. Our guides help us, and our ancestors help us as well. So we'll briefly do a little recap, but primarily we're talking about the communication that we have, because within ourselves, we can't resolve these memories, okay? The sensitivity comes from the moon, and the moon is very temporal. It's the fastest moving object in the sky. It moves and changes its zodiac sign every 2.5 days. And the sun is every 30 days. You talk about Mars, it's approximately every 40 days. You talk about the outer planets, the transpersonal planets, you're talking years and years before they change signs. And we're having a lot of sign changes now with these very important generational transpersonal planets. They represent generations as opposed to a birthday, 1 year, like the sun. So the moon, every 2.5 days, is very temporal. However, it is a key indicator of our soul. And so when you look at your moon sign lesson that is in the previous 2 or 3 sessions, we were talking about the moon sign being our way out emotionally. It is a way to self-regulate, and the self-regulation our angels want us to know, and particularly our guides really help with this regulation piece as well, because we don't always need to be regulated, especially as empaths. And that's why our healing is so important, is because we don't have the refined perspective on this that we need until we are healed, because everything is dysregulating, everything is upsetting. Okay, we're triggered very easily. what we really want when we're talking about regulation is we really want to be able to value our sensitivity. Oftentimes we're upset because something really needs to be addressed, an injustice, an abandonment of a responsibility, or an abuse of someone, or we're just heartbroken about something. Sometimes staying calm and staying centered is not the goal when we are actually needing to deal with what's in front of us. And empaths have to do that before we can move on. We don't have the luxury of getting rid of feelings and pretending like they're not there. And so we want to be able to distinguish between when we do need to regulate in order to actually function in our daily lives, and when something happens that is a huge indicator that we need to go from A, that sensitivity, to B, in our own pace and in our own time. And isn't that the way it is when we are planning a trip? We're planning to fly somewhere. We kind of research the prices online. We kind of see what destination we want to go to, depending on its purpose. And for our purposes here, we're talking about being able to live in the world terrestrially with our feet on the ground, as well as acknowledge and live according to the truths of our celestial realities that we're in touch with. This kind of field of consciousness that we incarnate with is something that causes us a great deal of hurt, a great deal of obstacles in connecting with others because they do not relate or feel the same way. And particularly if our mothers are wounded as they are with MDT and projecting that onto us, it complicates our emotional intelligence. We're not able to distinguish between what our desires are and what our needs are. So this is very, very important to understand, because what we tend to do is to deify our fears because they're so closely associated with what our maternal needs are. Remember in How Do You Goddess, in that session, we talked about the mother being our first goddess, overall, planetarily, and individually as infants, having our needs and everything and our care and our comfort and everything met by the mother. And so when we have MDT as these highly sensitive infants, and we're feeling and then we're absorbing in our small little bodies the drama and the trauma that our mothers have transferred onto us, we are beginning to feel the results of our karma of not living up to where we are as a soul. This is not a judgment or condemnation. However, we know that in the material realm, if we're going to be here, there are laws as above, so below. And in the divine order of life, while there is no judgment and condemnation of us as divine children, there are consequences for our behavior, for what we actually do. And so the consequences that we have are the direct result of our own behaviors over many lifetimes of judgments, of condemnations. Okay, that seems to be a pretty normal thing, right? Pretty human thing. And a culmination of how we have been unloving as mothers ourselves or parents ourselves. And it's a rites of passage. Everyone has to, at some point, go through mama drama trauma. Isn't it quite apparent? The mother wound is normal. It always has been normal. Through all of our mythologies and everything we talked about as a goddess, through everything, it's just a rites of passage for souls. So we deify these fears because we intuit the connection as old souls, and we've gone through many things. Our soul looks back and it wonders, how the heck did it get over that? And there are reasons why we have done what we've done. We're not terrible people. We have lived lives and circumstances that have challenged us in ways that we did certain things to survive, which is the human thing to do, and why our mantra is, I am a dearly loved. We are where we're supposed to be, doing what we're supposed to be doing, and that is expressing great Mother, Father, God, Spirit in the world through our desires. Our wires get tripped at a certain stage of evolution and certain stages of evolution, and we need an extra push, we need extra help, and we're always given what we need, right, to do what we need to do. And the angels, guides, and ancestors are always with us to help us with this. And so we have this connection, but yet we are hit on the head or abused in some other way, neglected, rejected by our mothers, and that brings into question that connection. So that's why part 1 is all about that connection and who they are. So we're clear about what that is. Our connection is true. It is not our imagination, but it feels that way because of MDT. And so we have this dichotomy going on and this internal conflict that the angels are ready, able, and willing to resolve with us as we take the first step, and they will take 2. So, as we initiate and we ask and we make that connection, we want to be very clear that who we're talking to and what we're talking about is going to be the best connection to deliver what we want. So when we're talking about going from sensitivity and this terrestrial human experience of MDT to the celestial experience of healing and divinity identity, feeling our birthright of being happy, healthy, and whole, we're flying on the wings of our angels, guides, and ancestors. So in the Mama Trauma Healing Oracle deck, the suits are divided by the acronym ASPIRE, because that is our aspiration. In order to live and experience our birthright of being happy, healthy, and whole, we have to live in loving detachment. And isn't that what we do when we are flying in a plane? We have to detach from everything on the ground in order to get from point A to point B. If the control tower is where there are communications about ground traffic, the airplanes at the airport and getting in and getting out safely, local traffic, what's going on around the area in terms of what level, flight height and everything to go and at what distance to elevate, then we have a communication between ground controllers and tower controllers and the pilot. Now, the ground controllers can be likened to our ancestors. No one is controlling us in the sense of the word, but to use the analogy, the ancestors do have a sense of stewardship over our DNA, over the available channels of communication with others in our tribe, to the degree that we resonate with their vibe and we have spiritual access to one another. Okay, and this is usually done through that vibe. I use the Negro spirituals here in this teaching about the angels, guides, and ancestors, and the gospel music and the drum beat for me. Ancestors relate to the material objects. Again, that ground controller has the headphones on, is actually physically, materially present, looking at the airplane, directing it in a specific physical direction. Our ancestors are not just our DNA, but they represent ancient places, spaces, herbs, artifacts, photos, burial grounds. And so we liken them to the fairies. And we have the Pachamama card and the root chakra acknowledged suit for A. And this is the waning gibbous moon card about ground, trees, and fairies, grounding ourselves, needing to ground ourselves. And this message being transmitted by the angels when we receive this card through Great Mothers downloading the deck, this purely spiritual species that is informing us that as human beings, Hu in the Sanskrit, spirit beings, we need to ground ourselves. We are treated like the actual airplanes in this analogy. We are instruments of flight. We go between the worlds, and there's a certain maintenance that we need back and forth. Okay? If an airplane needs maintenance, an automobile and any other traveling device needs to be oil, it needs oil, needs to be clean, needs to be washed, needs to rest. Certain things need to be changed out when they wear out. We certainly do too. And so that's what the Pachamama ground, trees, fairies card reminds us of when we see that beautiful Pachamama Peruvian energy of the mother, the breast rising from the earth to embrace us and protect us and to love us. So the deck was created to transmit these messages for us in a very clear way between the material and the immaterial worlds. As we travel, learning what our specialty is in healing and how we can assist others. People often ask, well, what am I supposed to do? What's my purpose? It's whatever you can do right now that helps you and helps others. That's all that healing is. And we want to be clear about what that help is. We more specifically want to be supportive, like our angels, guides, and ancestors. And that's a lot of times how we get confused about them, because it's not so much about help. It is always about support. The overwhelm of MDT usually shows up as us responding to Great Mother's call home, a call home to peace, a call home to self-emancipation, activating our divinity identity to release ourselves from the throes of this dis-ease. Often, until we have a daily practice that supports that transformation, we will respond to it as we've done something wrong, and we're feeling the pain as not being good enough, not being worthy, because we're not fulfilling what others want and need. And we stay in this loop of self-sabotage, which hurts so badly because we are at a level of soul evolution where we know that's not true. However, the tactics that we use to negotiate the difficulties of being reliant on someone who rejects you or does not understand you or does not want you around is so difficult, and the reason that we isolate to minimize it, or we become addicts to escape it. This creates the mental instability and the suicidal reaction to just stop the pain. And that's what addiction is. It's just stop the pain. I don't care what I need to do, where I need to go, who I need to see, what needs to happen. Just stop the pain, because we don't want or need anything or anyone else. We really don't want or need anything else. And we know that on a very deep level. It's just that when we are in human form as emotional beings and being dysregulated emotionally, this instability does not give us the energetic reserves necessary to make this adjustment. Intellectually, it makes sense. Intellectually, it sounds, albeit difficult, feasible if one does commit the energy and the effort towards it. But we have all these ifs and these ifs and these ifs, not really taking into account the value of the fact that we really don't want or need anyone. We just are wounded and are focused on the wound and the void that it has caused us emotionally. And we're wanting to fill an emotional void when the call home from Great Mother is a spiritual one. It can never be filled emotionally. That's why the practice is loving detachment. Loving detachment, there's no resentment. There's no regret. There's no feeling cheated or left behind or not recognized or not. There's none of that. It's a detachment because we do not need or want anyone or anything, because that's the truth. That's the truth that we need to embrace, not in the way that younger souls embrace that, with licentiousness and arrogance and all the things that we can be too. We can be very narcissistic when we are caught up into this dysregulation. But if we work with Great Mother Spirit team of angels, guides, and ancestors, we stop whining for things we either don't or won't muster the energy to achieve, or that we don't need, and we begin winning on the emotional and the spiritual front. We start actually manifesting the things and the people in our lives that we do need, like people that don't need to drain us every day, that we see every once in a while because they're actual friends that we want to see when we want to see them, and they're just thankful and glad to see us when that happens, and vice versa. It's the kind of support that we need and that we have the capacity to access as empaths. So when we're talking about our angels helping us and being clear about our power as empaths, we have to realize that help has been associated with the AGAS when support is a more accurate term. AGAS support us. The angels, guides, and ancestors, they reproach us as supposed to reprimand us. They will not rebuke us or condemn us or anything, because they are a great Mother Spirit team. They're the messengers, okay? They are not going to judge or condemn. They redirect. A lot of times, and always, I should say, in the beginning of our communication, because our minds have been conditioned towards shame, blame, and guilt, they will tell us the same things over and over again. And that's why there are 36 triggers in the deck that we work with through the chakras, when there are really only 3: shame, blame, and guilt. They had to come at me all these different ways so that I could see how that was showing up in my life. The first few years I was just working with the prototype deck, and shame, blame, and guilt just came up before people started talking about shame, blame, and guilt. And that is the redirecting that they do with us, and the reapproaching us to reframe the nature of support that we're seeking. They don't tell us what to seek. They're not sitting there with their arms folded saying, oh, well, I know what you want, and all of this kind of stuff. No, they know that we are divine beings. And for example, we might be requesting more freedom, okay, or release from responsibility or relationship. Oftentimes we are, but instead of clearing an expected pathway, or the answer comes in the form of creating a new one. So we are flying in our plane and we're going somewhere, and instead of there being some type of turbulence that we become so emotionally dysregulated because we're feeling that we don't have any more energy to stay calm, to listen to where the angels are going to guide us, we're frustrated and we're upset because they're not just taking the airplane on their wings and saving us. Although that does happen, and we talked about that in part 1 about the soul contracts. There are soul contracts that intervene in these examples as well. But primarily on a day-to-day basis, we are the ones who are being developed. We're the ones who are in guide training, and so that's what we're being directed to do and assisted and supported to do with our angels, guides, and ancestors. They might not open up this clearing or a path, but the answer comes in the form of creating a new one. And there's a co-creation that happens, that turbulence in the plane, and so we're able to maintain a semblance of calmness for long enough to listen to what the control tower is saying. You know, those guides and those ancestors, what are they saying? They can see beyond that turbulence. And if we have enough energy just to listen and to trust, it might seem completely crazy. They're saying I should go straight through it. You know, I'm thinking I need to drop down and do something, you know, and just go down, you know, a couple of miles and go that way. That's what it's feeling like to me. Well, we are always given the opportunity every day to learn and to grow. But what happens with us a lot of times is that because we don't use the support, we'll get upset if things don't turn out the way we expect them to. And oftentimes that does happen. And we get angry with the angels. You know, we can get really upset. And it's really kind of a transfer of the anger from the mother. And so that's why the angels, guides, and ancestors can be compared to the mother, and why so often mothers do come through when you are with a psychic medium, empath, or someone like that, you know, to assure us that we always have that love and protection. We never have to question it, but we do until we know, and we don't know until we trust it. And so we're learning every day how to trust it. And so it's not a reprimand that, for in that example, we didn't trust the turbulence needed to be flown through, and we ended up really having a bad crash and this and whatever happened, and maybe even had a near-death experience. And There are stories with NDEs that have to do with a lot of these guidance issues, whether it is that type of scenario or a scenario where I saw in a show where a lady was talking about her NDE and she knew that she was going to have difficulty in her pregnancy and it was going to be life-threatening and it was going to be possibly fatal. So by her knowing that and her following that guidance, she was able to avoid not losing her child and losing her life, but she did have an NDE that confirmed for her the power of her trusting. So there's a lot involved in all of this, but we want to be clear that we are distinguishing between help and support. They support our divinity. They're not, helping is more like a helper is somebody, they're doing something that they think others need. Okay, we're doing something that we think someone needs, and it's really a setup because it's based on desiring a specific outcome. Okay, so a specific outcome is expected by the person and by the helper, and if it's not fulfilled, the helped is upset and the helper is blamed, versus support, which the helper supplies to enable the helped to be responsible for their own outcome. And so we want to be that way as well with others. And so as in addition to their support in our daily lives and safety and security, they are helping us fly as well in terms of supporting others in healthy ways, not in ways that keep us locked into this ball of confusion about who we are and what our assistance is and whether or not they're available and will it work. This is how our communication works. So we are reproached by the angels. Rappaport, the French word that basically means harmony or establishing or the resumption of harmonious relations after, particularly after a war. It's a diplomatic term. But in psychology, rapprochement means it's a task of developing a sense of individuality in the context of ongoing relationships. So that's what we're doing. We are developing our own spiritual independence, our own individuality, our own little way of being, our own unique self, and owning that, not just to be unique, but because we are expressing, speaking, and being our truth. This idea of doing this in all of our ongoing relationships, this rapprochement, is a direct borrowing of this diplomatic term in terms of the reconciliation that we can make as we grow. I was talking about people with NDEs, and many times they talk about the difficulty they have in returning to their relationships after this experience. They can't talk about it. People don't understand. Oftentimes they don't understand what's happened. They don't understand these things we're talking about here at MDT Academy. And the reconciliation that they must make with people on a ego level. On a soul level, there is some type of soul agreement for this to transpire. And oftentimes it is because we are guides in training. We're helping other people to grow. But if we can't keep a grip, it just makes everything more difficult. So literally, we're always in a state of approaching and reapproaching situations. So we want to get away from this idea of finality. A pilot of a plane doesn't just make one trip. They go from point A to point B and then pick up and go from point A to point B. And that's who we are. We are the pilots. We direct our own lives. We decide where we want to go. And this resumption of harmonious relations with those that we've had frayed relationships with is oftentimes viewed as impossible in the beginning. How can we get from that point A to sensitivity to point B to divinity identity? They're not going to understand us on a soul level. Well, everyone's different and everyone has their own situation, and I've seen it go both ways. I've seen there be a situation of no contact emerge as much as I have seen situations where mothers have met their daughters where they needed to be met, and there's been, if not a reconciliation, there's been a resolution between them about what is really going on and a renegotiation of how that relationship needs to go forward. So the confirmation comes in being able to recognize that Great Mother Spirit team knows we are worthy of maternal protection, provision of care, and maternal presence in every way and in everyday life. And they support us in unraveling these deeply embedded sensitivities and traumas. Now, the communication steps laid out in Angel Speak, which was introduced in part 1, is an excellent process to understand our journey, our healing journey. And so although there's no need to be a special person with special skills like an empath in order to communicate with angels, the commitment and the follow-through required to do so effectively, consistently, is something that empaths do have a capacity for. And we want to appreciate our ability to keep things simple. So the KISS, Keep Things Simple Seeker, is really what we're after here with this analogy. So as empaths find the plane, we realize that there's baggage. There are assets, relationships that are assets, attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors that support us, that help us to evolve in self-love and spiritual independence, that support us in living in love and detachment. And then there are relationships and there are things, ideas, beliefs, and behaviors that are liabilities that we're carrying on our plane. And so these are the passengers. So as mother wound empaths, we are on this plane that has our guides and angels in the air control tower, and we also have our ancestors on the ground control. And so the ground control, as well as the air control, but both of them are helping to ensure our safe travel, our safe takeoff and landing. So that's the most important part of travel for most of us, is that takeoff and that landing, right? For others, that intermediate portion, or when we hit that cruise control level, is that in between. And that's really where our angels are present in a very real way. When there are clouds and we can't see where we're going and we really don't know, we have to rely on the skills we've developed as a pilot over many lifetimes to direct our journey through their guidance. So the first step in communicating with our angels, we're told, is to pray. And this is true, because what we're praying for is to Great Mother, Father God, to open us up as a channel for their word, for their guidance to us about what we need. And we can need anything. We can ask for anything that we want. We just need to be sure that when we're praying, that we are asking to be an open channel, an open vessel. We are praying that we are able to hear what they have to say, and that we are wanting to be as open as we possibly can, because we need to receive all that's available to us in responding to Great Mother's call. We know that there is a call for us, and we can liken the call to us being ready to go on a journey. We're readying ourselves. And so as that pilot, gets ready for the journey, there's a ritual that he does. He gets the actual destination of where he needs to go, what he needs to do. Or sometimes it's a leisure pilot going where they want to go. Which one are you? Be clear about which one are you in the moment. When we are in the throes of healing something, we're in the throes of regulating a trigger. We're in the throes of dealing with the trigger and allowing it to breathe through us and live through us so that we can get the information we need. What type of pilot are we? We want to approach the angels with that clarity, because they are the messengers. And the clarity of the message we receive is going to be based on the clarity of what we pray. So in part 1, we talked about connecting with the angels. And so by part 2, communicating with the angels, we're ready. We're ready. So the first thing to set up the back and forth communication about a particular issue is to pray. Pray to Great Mother, Father God, for the clarity. Get ready for the journey. Have the openness to respond to the call. That's the first step. The second step is to breathe. Just relax, get comfortable, breathe, be in that space. It's not an active space. You're not going to do anything right now. You're just going to breathe in the openness. As you breathe in openness, exhale the constriction, the doubts. You're going to breathe, and there's no meditation here. And so this is a threshold that is allowing us to open up to the options, to see the different routes that we can go. What routes can we possibly go, maybe? And just breathing it in and just allowing ourselves to see an infinite number of outcomes, so much so that we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know exactly how we're going to get to where we're going to get to. But we know when we're breathing in and we're breathing out that a message is coming for us. This message that comes for us is the next step. The third step is listening. We're switching on our listening ears. We're switching on the distinctions that are being made, the decision that is being made about where we're going to go. Okay, so this is the point on the map. This is where I'm actually going to go. And letting go of the indecision is being in that space of, okay, I'm ready to listen. I'm ready to trust what comes through. I'm ready to be still and hear the still small voice of Great Mother, Father God. I'm not going to force it. I'm here. I'm listening. I know it's coming. I'm listening. And usually it comes when you are most relaxed, not so much in an anticipatory mode, but you can do these first couple of steps and just breathe and get up and just, go about your day. And you'll just be so relaxed and so into the routine or something so perfunctory. You could be driving in your car, and so you really want to be in the habit of stopping, pulling over in a parking lot to be safe, or having your recorder phone ready just to push the recorder so you don't have to worry about trying to do anything else, and just start saying what you're getting. If you need to write it down, pull over. But that is the fourth step, writing. You're going to write down what you get once you get it, because it's going to come through. And you don't want to question it or second guess it. Don't worry about it. If it feels like your imagination, it'll always feel like your imagination. You're flying. You're above the terrestrial sense of communication. You're on a higher, and so it's going to always feel like that. But don't question it, because the next step is acceptance. What you write is what you write. Usually it's going to be very short and very direct, especially in the beginning. I have messages and notes that I wrote in my Angel Speak book, and it's really amazing. It's really amazing it's really amazing to be able to see just how accurate they are years later. We're in 2024. These are notes I took 2004, 2005, 2006, and it's just amazing what they were saying to me. Now, the next step after accepting is inner knowing. So the inner knowing piece is basically this internal confirmation that you're going to receive. It's like the in-flight entertainment. You've gotten off the ground. You are in cruise control with the writing you've already done. You have already switched on to get what you need, whether it was buying a ticket or whether it was getting through the airport with your ID. You're on. You're good. You are in flight. The angels have you in their wings in that middle part of the journey. And you're there. That's the inner knowing. You're there. And there's no ego there at all. It has vacated the premises. It's spirit to spirit. You probably won't remember what you wrote. I didn't remember any of the stuff that I wrote down. You'll just remember how you felt when you did it. And it just comes. It just flows. It just comes. It just flows. And you just receive. You just receive. And the final and the seventh step is you trust what you've received. These are timely spiritual gifts that you receive every angel communication. Sometimes the angels will feel like they are delaying, but it's not them. It's Great Mother who has the angels, they don't have a sense of time. Great Mother doesn't either. But the angels do empathize with us. They're not emotional beings, but they do understand and know how we feel. And so they know that we are temporal human beings in a particular lifetime, and that we do need support. And so that's why we want to be open to unexpected guidance, as in the example of needing to fly through the turbulence as opposed to below it. Sometimes it'll be below. Sometimes it'll be above. Sometimes it'll be around. But often, especially with MDT, it's going to be going through it, because we need to use the wisdom we have earned. And we're in a lifetime where we haven't done that, to the point that we're basically being coerced not as a punishment, not as a judgment, but to prove to ourselves that we not only have the capacity to do these things, but the ability as well. So I wanted to be sure that we went through those steps. Again, they are step 1, pray. 2, breathe. 3, listen. 4, dictate. Write it down. Now, there's a difference between automatic writing, dictation, and that sort of thing. Automatic writing is an unconscious kind of mode of writing. This is not what we're talking about. We're just talking about writing down. The 5th step is accept what you wrote. Accept the message. The 6th step is the inner knowing. Allow that inner knowing to take hold of you and to envelop you. That's where the ego vacates. All the doubt disappears into trust, the 7th step. There are some different ways in which we communicate with our angels than younger souls, because making contact for us is a yin exercise as well. We're just more equipped to consistently achieve the connection because that is our natural default. And that is what we're trying to avoid, which is why we have MDT. Okay? And it's also why a lot of people resent us and make fun of us and say, oh, you're so hypersensitive, and oh, we have to walk on eggshells around you and all that sort of thing. We are openly disliked many times. And so we have to learn how to accept that and understand that there are ways to communicate who we are. And how we do that is by realizing that the loving communication first starts with ourselves, being loving detached from the MDT itself, so that we can be lovingly detached from others. Okay, we have to get that internal space where we need it to be in order to be the healthy empaths that we desire and that our angels, guides, and ancestors desire to support us in being as well. We are wavering in our inner strength, which is what healthy empaths don't do and what angels don't do, which is why they're helping us to be stronger. We have a tendency to panic a lot, and they are helping to cultivate confidence. We have a tendency to seek and even feel that we need external security, when in actuality, it's anything but that. Internal security is what we are developing this lifetime. As old souls, we're needing to really let go of this resistance to change so that we can adapt to these larger, grander realities of life that exist without allowing them to completely take us down. We are being trained to support others like us in the future. Now, I want to go over the challenges of this connection in a little bit more detail. I've talked a little bit about, how hard it is for us because of the abandonment and the abuse, and the fears associated with trusting us, which essentially is good to understand. But the challenges to praying for some of us has a lot to do with not really feeling that we've been heard before. Many of us have been praying since we've been small children for things that have continued to go on, that have contributed to MDT. And so when we talk about prayer and faith and trusting that, it's a lot easier for us to zone out into a meditative state and that sort of thing, which is fine. But if we want to communicate with our angels without ego, we have to realize that spiritual bypass is a real thing. And we cannot bypass spirit and connect with our angels in healthy ways. Spiritual bypass is when we pretend to have a level of spiritual maturity, or we've attained a certain level of spirituality or spiritual development or evolution that we truly have not earned. So that's problematic, okay? And so, in other words, when we have a problem praying because of the hurt that we feel for not having what we were expecting, and going to another way of connecting that we feel will take the place of prayer, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. We have to connect with the spirit. And a clue to that is the fact that most of us have active clairs. There are 8 clairs, but primarily when we're communicating with angels, guides, and ancestors, we're talking about clairvoyance, clairaudience, and clairsentience. Well, there's claircognizance too, which is similar to clairsentience. That clear knowing, just knowing what you know, Clairsentience is more about feeling that knowing. Claircognizance can be more of a mental thing, which is more of a psychic thing. Clairvoyance is, of course, seeing things that are not visible. Clairaudience is hearing things that are not there. So the hearing and listening. Hearing is what's audible. Listening is that audience, giving something audience, actually listening for the meaning of something. And because we have that, we have to honor what that these are French words again: clairvoyance, clairaudience, clear vision, clear sight, clear feeling. What has opened up that channel is spirit. It didn't come from anything else. And so that's why a lot of times we want to avoid spirit, because we don't understand it. And once we do, we can effectively communicate. And so why don't we effectively communicate? And this goes to why we feel that our prayers have not been answered many times. The number one reason that we have challenges with prayer often has to do with our own self-doubt. And so if we are doubting ourselves and doubting our ability to connect, everyone has doubts. Everyone has doubts about, is this real? Is this my imagination? And that sort of thing. But with empaths, we don't just have doubts, we have self-doubt. Everyone assumes problems with perception. Okay, this is another challenge. The first challenge is doubt. The second challenge we have is just perception and our interpretation. We're not sure whether or not we're perceiving or we're interpreting things correctly. We have the clairs, and we can often feel them as a liability because we're connected and we're getting a lot of information, but it's a lot of information that we don't want, these liabilities, instead of the assets of the angels, guides, and ancestors. So we have to decide, because we have free will, what filter that we are opening up to. That's why prayer is so important. Are we opening through the filter of shame, blame, and guilt, and we're wanting to address something through that filter? Well, I got blamed for X, Y, and Z. What should I do about that? Well, it's going to be hard to perceive and it's going to be hard to interpret a message from a messenger who always filters through divinity identity. They always filter through our birthright to be happy, healthy, and whole. So it's going to be something in response to that that has to do with take care of yourself, love yourself, be happy about what you do have, what you don't have. Go into a situation that supports you more. And it's like, I don't want to hear that. I want to hear about how am I supposed to address this shame, this blame. I've been blamed for this. And it's like, okay, so that's a real challenge. Perception and interpretation, these doubts. Everyone has expectations of angelic communication, but because we are often exhausted from overstimulation or invest our energies into escapism to avoid it, we expect the angels to fix it. Just put me on your wings, angel. I don't want to be worried about trying to listen to the air traffic control. Well, I don't want to be worried about listening to you. You just go ahead and fix it here instead of redirecting our own energies to heal ourselves. And see, we're too old for that. It's just like you walking around, sometimes you can see these 5-year-old, 6-year-old kids sucking on a bottle. That's not happening with a real mama for real. That ain't happening. So, great mother, trust and believe, is a real mama for real. And we're not getting away with that anymore. That is a real challenge. Yes, there's a justified reason and there's no judgment. There's no condemnation for being tired. There's no judgment or condemnation for feeling that you're just exhausted and you need a break and you just want somebody to help. These expectations. When in actual fact, the karma calls for support. We're needing the support to evolve in self-love and spiritual independence. So another challenge we have are expectations. Everyone has expectations of angelic communication. But again, because we're exhausted and everything, we expect them to do stuff for us. What we receive is what the angels want to tell us. It may be simple. It could be a complicated message. Just trust and accept what is given. It will be clear by and by. These are timely gifts, and they give us what we need in the moment. In our reading classes for the Mama Drama Trauma Healing Oracle deck, we always have to be reminded that although we don't have to ask the same question over and over again, we do, because we are temporal. We have emotions as human beings. We might feel one way about a question that we're asking, and then we might feel another way, and we want to get a response from different angles. And sometimes we might just be insisting on a different answer, But it tends to be the same answer until something within us shifts. And then that's when we see the changing answer. That's a question that we often get. Well, the answer changed. And I was like, well, what changed in you? And there's always something that has changed because the angels always frame their responses based on what we are engaging in at the time, what's going to be relevant to us at the time. We're flying over Colorado. Air traffic control is not going to give us the coordinates for Kansas City. We're going to be getting the coordinates for Colorado going, due southwest to Arizona for our destination. That's what we're going to get, which brings us to psychic gossip. A lot of times, again, when we are caught in these attachments, carrying all this baggage on our planes that are liabilities, we are caught up in that. And we're asking about that. Ex-boyfriends and ex-husbands and what they doing. And, my mother-in-law, what's she doing? And who gonna be doing this over at the family picnic? And, how much money they got and all that stuff. Angels do not entertain psychic gossip. If we receive a message about someone else their angel sent it because we needed to know it for our highest good and for the highest good of everyone involved. That's it. That is it. Other challenges that we have to do with just wrong information. It could be, again, our filter, which complicates it because, again, we're on the shame, blame, and guilt tip until we're not. Everybody is until we're not. We've been conditioned for that. So that's why the daily practice is so important. We're changing that. We're working with that. And then one day we're not on that anymore. But until then, there can be some wrong information that we feel that we've received from the other side. The angels are simple, spiritual, loving souls. And we do have a spirit team. But if we're asking about, again, things that are very temporal, about the politics of the world or about the neighbor or about this and about that, and it's really not about our soul evolution, not to say it's good or that it's bad, they're going to tell you what they have from their spiritual perspective. And it might sound strange, but it's almost like asking a French-speaking angel to give you an answer, in French. It's like they're going to bring in an angel that will know a little bit more about that, or a guide or ancestor that you've had that was a politician and understands the landscape of politics that you're asking about. They're going to bring in someone else. And so, engineers have angels who are interested in engineering, doctors and doctors, teachers and teachers, artists and artists, gardeners and gardeners. A lot of times, again, the fairies, they'll come with them. As above, so below. Fairies are kind of like the antecedent of cherubs. Seraphim are kind of like the antecedents of monks and nuns. You'll have guides of Jesus and saints and gurus. You have, archangels who are, those who are over large spiritual conclaves and groups and that sort of thing internationally. So institutions and organizations and that sort of thing, although that's kind of a wobbly analogy. That's why we want to, when we're asking to be open, we want to be open to receiving the information that we're needing, and with those that we already have trusting relationships with that we may have never called on before. Mother Mary, she comes in to assist with worried mothers a lot of the time. And because she relates so well to motherhood. So angels give us the best that they have at the moment, but time doesn't mean much to them. They are aware of how important it is to us and how important specific events are to us. But they are more, again, that air traffic control that is going to assist the ancestors, the guides, and they're going to assist them to help us have a safe landing and takeoff. An incarnation, birth is very dangerous. And so they're overlooking the process of the DNA that's selected and the time that we're born and the casting of the birth chart and those energies, what they create, how those chakras will be expressed in a human being, and all of that calculus, that cosmic calculus, is very important. They have no concept of time because our lives are like a blink of an eye to them. But it's important who we are and what we do and what we learn while we're here. While we're here, we're the pilots of the life, and we call on them, and we carry this baggage that they're helping us to unload. They're helping us to direct ourselves. They don't want us to be overweight. They don't want us to crash. And a lot of times, if we're focused and we're too attached to those things or even to this life, we'll stay grounded. We won't fly as much and feel that divinity, which is what we absolutely want to have, which takes us to our last challenge that we tend to have, which is our attitude. It's hard to be positive all the time, I know. And we're not expected to be. That's completely unrealistic. But what we do want to know is that the best way to ensure clear, loving messages is that when we do begin our communication is to be in the best space that we can possibly be in, because again, that filter that they're going to be communicating to us from is from that birthright we have to be happy, healthy, and whole. And the more aligned we are with that frequency, the more we're on that bandwidth, the more we are working with the megahertz or the hertz, the level which we need to fly to have that cruising altitude with them and communicating from that tower, we receive the greatest clarity. We have the greatest energy to fulfill what we choose to fulfill based on that guidance. And we can expect beings of light to be up by our side. We can expect high angelic presence. That's what I'm trying to say. The presence, the protection, the provision of care, that love that we so seek, that void is filled. And the communication is a continual thing at that point, because it lightens that void and it heals more than you. The others includes our ancestors who have also had this affliction. Our healing heals them. It heals the bloodline. It's a very powerful thing when we begin to ask our angels, please teach me about love that replaces fear so that I can have the positive attitude I need to replace these negative expectations that have become a part of me and that have become a part of defining my life. And it is from there that we begin to see and to know and to realize how far we've come. And that's when we begin to look back and wonder no more how we got over, because we know it has been with the loving guidance and the teaching of loving detachment from our angels, guides, and ancestors that we got over. I hope that's been helpful for you and that you enjoyed your flight to empaths and angel communication today at MDT Academy. But above all and most of all, remember, Great Mother loves you, and I do too.
You know that my soul looks back.
You know, my soul looks back and it wonders how it got over. But you know, I know it's my angels, my guides, my ancestors who were with me every step of the way, every day, making sure no matter what came my way, I would have guidance.